There is a lot of strong sentiment for monarchy. A lot of people, there's a good maybe 30-40% of the country would like the monarchy to be restored, and maybe another 30-40% that are indifferent, wouldn't mind it, and maybe a small percentage, 10% or so, where we obviously will be against it.
And maybe is Bitcoin sort of, an accelerator? Because like in a Bitcoin dominated world, the world just looks differently and we might be going back to something like more monarchies.
The question of it is, what's a better system, a governance model? Democracy, monarchy, democracy with a monarchy attached to it, or absolute monarchy. But I feel that there is a lot of worth in having a monarchy, and what I like to note is that Bitcoin and monarchy do have some synergies, and the two main synergies, and one of them is
Prince Filip of Yugoslavia, heir to the Serbian throne and finance pro, is a global Bitcoin advocate and CSO at Jan3 since moving to Serbia in 2020.
He's championed Bitcoin as a path to financial freedom and inflation resistance, blending royal legacy with modern tech.
We're seeing a lot of mining adoption around the world. A country like Bhutan was secretly mining Bitcoin for many years. And look how they are right now. They have a stack bigger than El Salvador. And I have to point out that they're a monarchy. And with that money that you make mining Bitcoin, you can then use it to stack up or to use it to fund more infrastructure projects or any project in the country.
Do you think there's like certain type of cultures or ethnicities that understand Bitcoin more easily?
It's a good question. Really, that depends on...
One thing I need to ask you, because you're a Serb, is really, when will Djokovic announce that he's sort of a Bitcoin?
He understands what's happening in the world, and I think it'll be a matter of time before...
Is anyone working on orange pilling him?
Well, he has wealth to protect as well, and there's nothing better than Bitcoin.
Hey guys, welcome back to Less Noise, More Signal. Today, a very interesting guest that I was able to bring on the show. It's Filip. Thank you, Filip, for coming online.
Hi, Pascal. Thank you for having me. And it was good to meet you in Abu Dhabi last December.
Yes, exactly. It was interesting. We were actually walking to the conference center right next to each other, and we were both looking for the entrance, as it is in these countries. I'm not used to, you're somebody from Europe as well, and there things seem to be more accessible. And every time I'm somewhere in the Middle East or in Singapore, in these big cities, you're just walking around and you get lost, because everything is so vast. And so that's where we actually met. We were looking for the entrance, right?
Yeah, I remember that. It was a bit tough to find, but we got there. Yeah, I now come from a smaller city. I was living in London most of my life, but I moved to Serbia like 5-6 years ago. And Serbia, Belgrade is it's smaller compared to London. So going to a big city like Abu Dhabi was I felt like a small town boy or something going to a big city.
Yeah, it's the same for me all the time. It's in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. It's always the same. You feel like, okay, as a European, you want to walk around town, you want to explore stuff. Nobody else is doing this. And then you figure out why, because everything looks so close with the skyscrapers, but in the end, it's just vast, and there's also not a real good accessible, like sort of walkway.
They make it accessible, but it's much easier if you're driving by car. But once you park the car, it's not easy, and especially, well, it wasn't that hot, but yeah.
No, but that's just something that I figured when I was in other big cities. Well, no, cool to have you on. Maybe if you could quickly introduce yourself to people who might not be familiar with you, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm Prince Filip of Serbia, and I am a Bitcoiner. I work for Jan3, which is a company dedicated to helping to speed up hyper-Bitcoinization or nation-state adoption. And we also focus, that's our top-down strategy, but we also focus on bottom-up strategies. And we have a wallet, Aqua Wallet, which we can talk about later on if you want. And we work on basically technological Bitcoin technical solutions and speeding up adoption around the world.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, sure. I want to tackle this as well, the Aqua wallet and what you guys have been seeing on this round. But maybe like first off, that's something obviously some people might be intrigued by as well. You introduced yourself as Prince Filip. So can you maybe elaborate why Prince and what has this got to do with Serbia? So in today's world, you don't get to meet a prince every now and then.
So Serbia used to be a monarchy. It was a monarchy more of its history than a republic or communist. Serbia was a monarchy from, I'm going back many, many years, from the 11th century. But my family's origins comes from Karađorđe. So my surname is Karađorđević, son of Karađorđe. Karađorđe was, so Serbia was under Ottoman Empire rule for hundreds of years. And we were basically slaves under the Ottomans. And in 1804, my great, that's four-great-grandfather, Karađorđe, he was the one who led the first uprising against the Ottomans. He became a general, was actually democratically voted to become the leader, and he was known to be very good at, very skillful and a good leader and very tactical on the battlefield. And with a small army, he managed to outmaneuver the Ottomans at the time. And he led the first uprising. I say first because there was another uprising about 15 years later, and led to Serbians' independence, sovereignty against the Ottoman Empire. And if you look at the map in 1804, you'll see that there was a big sea of Ottoman Empire, and then out of nowhere, boop, a little Serbia just appears out of the map. And that gave a lot of hope to the other nations that were under Ottoman rule. And subsequently after that, you saw many other countries becoming liberated. So you had Greece, you had Bulgaria, Romania, all these countries around that area slowly started to get independence back. But Serbia was that first mover, one of the first movers in the region. And so that was my great-great-great-grandfather. And there was, then fast forward to 1904 is when, so there was another dynasty that came about in Serbia, which was the Obrenović dynasty. And they're the ones who led the second uprising in around 1815, 17. And we were basically moving back and forth between that dynasty and our dynasty. But then by the early late 1800s, they were actually all assassinated off. And then my great-grandfather, King Peter I, became king. And his son, was King Alexander, who then was the one that was very instrumental in forming Yugoslavia. But he was assassinated in 1934, with the first assassination ever caught on film, funny enough. And then my grandfather was too young to become king. He was only 13 when his father was assassinated. So there was a regent king. So that was King Alexander's cousin. And then in 1941, when my grandfather became of age, he became king. But that time it was the middle of the Second World War, and things were very ugly in the region. And then by 1945, the partisans that's the socialist movement, communist movement within Serbia had taken over, and the monarchy was abolished. And along came communism or socialism. Along came the eradication of private property rights, and all our property was confiscated. We were kicked out the country, and meant this was not just the royal family, but many other individuals as well suffered the same fates. And then that's when Serbia moved into its republic mode. And so then fast forward to my father was born in 1945. He lived in exile all his life until, I was born, my older brother was born in 1980. Then I was born with my twin brother in 1982. Then my father in 2001 moved back to Serbia after the fall of Milosevic. And he moved into the palace here, and it's still owned by the state, I should say confiscated by the state under the Communist Confiscation Act. But we're living here, and I moved here with my wife and son in 2020, and then by 2023, my daughter was born, and 2022 is when I moved away out of traditional finance into Bitcoining, and I joined Jan 3, and here we are speaking today.
Okay, yeah, very interesting lineage, so to say. Not something everyone sort of has on their scorecard, so to say, but very, very interesting. But I mean, just concretely speaking, does this title carry any weight? Or is it just like, because you are Prince of Serbia, if Serbia was still a monarchy and still a kingdom, one day you would become king, but obviously because it's not that case anymore, in real life, it doesn't carry that much weight, or can you maybe elaborate on this? Like normal people guess they don't understand like the intricacies of monarchies and so like this.
Well, firstly, it's a non-functioning monarchy. So technically my father he's the head of the house. He's the pretender to the throne. If there was a throne, if there was a monarchy, he would become king. I would be the next in line. Actually, my older brother, he abdicated in 2022 because it's not really his thing, and he wanted to live a more private life, and I stepped up to the challenge. And so if there was a monarchy, I would be then the next in line after my father. So we are not obviously recognized by the state, by the system, but we are recognized by the people as the royal family. The only thing that's missing is for it to become legally binding with the constitution. But it was like this many years ago, and many people still believe it was like this before pre-1945, and many people believe that the monarchy was taken away under illegal circumstances. I won't go into the details, but a lot of people, there's a good maybe 30-40% of the country would like the monarchy to be restored, and maybe another 30-40% that are indifferent, wouldn't mind it, and maybe a small percentage, 10% or so, where we obviously will be against it. So there is a lot strong sentiment for monarchy. You know, a lot of people recognize the monarchy as the people as the my great grandfather, that's that's Karađorđe, who liberated Serbia, as the father of modern Serbia. So it comes with lots of what's the word I'm looking for? Patriotism. Like the monarchy is what drove the country to become a great country in Europe. Serbia was a very wealthy country in the 1800s and the first part and in the beginning of the 1900s, when it was a kingdom. It was because we had strong individual property rights. The monarchy the monarchy believed, with the continuation of the monarchy, the monarchy binded the people together, and there was a lot of wealth that was being produced here. And Yugoslavia was just even more, it was successful up until it was disintegrated when Tito died. And that was, sorry, Tito, I'm moving forward too quickly over here. So Tito was the dictator that took over Serbia in 1945, and a lot of people will like to give him credit for Yugoslavia, because Yugoslavia under Tito was I wouldn't say successful. They actually got a lot of the money from the West, so technically it wasn't a proper communist state. It was helped by a lot by the West. About 70% of its GDP came from activities with the West. But he had no succession plan. Just like any dictatorship, it was going to fail. And plus, he took away a lot of people's property rights. That just can't continue. So when he died in 1980, the subsequent fall of Yugoslavia was inevitable.
Yeah. At some point, there was even the name like floating around here in Switzerland, Milosevic, right? I think that was also, he was out. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he was one of the transitional governments that came about in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And he had a stronghold he managed to get a stronghold of Serbia. And not everything that's written about him in the Western media is correct, because there's a lot of propaganda against him.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because like I know somebody back in my school, who had that name, and she actually had to change the name even here at Switzerland because he was so badly received and stuff. And I was always wondering, okay, what's happening here? But yeah, that's just interesting to hear.
No, there was a lot of disgusting stuff that happened in this region with the breakup of Yugoslavia, and Milosevic is not the one to be fully blamed for it. There was a lot of other things that happened in Croatia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There was a lot of horrible activities, but Milosevic was used as a scapegoat, and Serbia was picked out because it was the strongest country in the region. And just yesterday, actually, was the 26th anniversary of the 1999 NATO aggression against Serbia, which was a 78-day bombing campaign against Serbia that was never actually approved by the United Nations Council or by America, but within America. And NATO, as they do, they just went on and did it, and that destroyed our country, and it just tore apart many families, killed many individuals, and we're still feeling the consequences of today, because that also led to the breakup of the illegal recognition of Kosovo as an independent country. So this is another topic that we can get into, but I think we can go back to Bitcoin. But yeah,
Milosevic was so complex.
I will probably get a bit of a stick for this, but it's just like if you support Putin, which I'm not openly supporting Putin. I don't think he's to blame for the war. I think there's many other things playing in the situation, but just the same idea with Milosevic, and the media in the West, in the international media, the legacy media, so to speak, always paint a different picture because they need to give an excuse to move the agenda of war, and war is a money making operation, and people are banking a lot of money because of that. And we're seeing that today with the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
This show is brought to you by NewHedge. In a market driven by complexity, insight is everything. NewHedge is a dedicated Bitcoin analytics and intelligence platform delivering cutting-edge analysis, on-chain metrics, and real-time market data. With 200 plus proprietary indicators, live derivatives data, and adoption metrics, NewHedge provides the depth and precision that serious market participants demand. Backed by some of Bitcoin's most prolific investors, NewHedge connects traditional finance with Bitcoin's evolving landscape. Gain your data edge today. Sign up for free now at newhedge.io and get 50% off your advanced subscription with the code SIGNAL. Yes, exactly. That's a great comparison. I mean, it's always a lot more complex and Byzantine as people would like it to be, and obviously it's easy to paint things black and white, but in reality, it's obviously oftentimes it's not the case. But yeah, as you said, I mean, it's true, the many Serbian people that we have here in Switzerland, they strike me to be a really patriotic breed. They're really patriotic and they stand up for their values. And that's just really interesting to see nowadays. Maybe these conflicts have also sort of brought you guys together, when I compare Serbians to other ethnicities and nations. And that's just really interesting to see.
It's interesting, but what destroyed us a lot in the 90s was extreme nationalism. And there's a difference between nationalism and patriotism. It's good to be patriotic. The differences are subtle but great. Nationalism teaches you that you are the best race, so to speak, or the best nation, and everyone else is below you. Well, patriotism is slightly different. It just teaches you that you should be proud of your nation. You should stick up for your nation, but you respect other nations and races equally. And what happened in the 90s is you had leaders like in Croatia, not many people talk about, like this Tudjman. President Tudjman was a horrific nationalist. And he led to his form of nationalism led to Croatia and Serbia having this big rivalry, and it will still exist today. And really, we're brothers. Okay, what separates us? So they're predominantly Catholic, and we're predominantly Orthodox. But really, we come from the same. We're from the same land. We got the same DNA essentially. So there's nothing that really separates us apart from nation and religion. But Christians get along with each other. Doesn't matter. Yes, we have situations around the world with Christians are fighting each other, but that's only when politics gets involved. And that's the horrible thing, is when politics turns people into horrible nationalists and moves them away from healthy patriots.
Yes, exactly. As soon as it becomes sort of a ism, like a nationalism, and then it gets into the extreme. This is always the horrible turnings that it takes. But I want to maybe segue to Bitcoin and maybe,
Sure.
With this last question about monarchies, because I think it might be connected, and maybe you have some thoughts here. But do you think that like the world, like we do have maybe some functional monarchies around the world? I'm not even sure, but maybe a lot of like constitutional monarchies. But do you think maybe also throughout Europe, will we ever go back to something like this, and maybe is Bitcoin sort of, an accelerator, because like in a Bitcoin dominated world, the world just looks differently, and we might be going back to something like more monarchies, or what is your belief there?
Well, I guess that's the question of it, is what's a better system, governance model, democracy, monarchy, democracy with a monarchy attached to it, or absolute monarchy. Well, these are conversations that we can have and debates that we can have. But I feel that there is a lot of worth in having a monarchy, and whether it could be constitutional, semi-constitutional, semi-absolute, or absolute. There's various degrees of monarchy out there. But what I like to note is that Bitcoin and monarchy do have some synergies. And the two main synergies, and one of them is that both monarchies and Bitcoin, it's all about strong individual private property rights. Everyone, okay, listeners here probably understand why that's very important for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is its premise is individual property rights. That's what it is. It's about being a sovereign individual. Well, the same idea goes with monarchy, that a monarch would like his subjects, I guess his people, to have strong individual property rights, to be wealthy, to be protected, to have their properties protected. Because if they're not protected, people will get upset and people will tend to revolt and create revolutions and try to throw the monarchy out. So it's in the interest of the monarch. And I'm talking about an absolute monarch, especially an absolute monarch. They will run the country like a business, and they're in it for the long game. And when I say that is they have a low time preference, meaning that they make decisions that last for generations. If they make a rash, bad decision, their children, and generations to come will feel the effects of that bad decision. So they have to take things. They have to be very measured with their decision making. And this is what the difference is between a democracy, whereas democracy, you have these 4 or 5 year election cycles, and essentially the government that gets voted in, they don't own the government, they don't own the country, so they are caretakers. So it's in their interest to see how much they can extract, how much value they can extract at that period of time. As much as possible, or they'll see how long they can stay in power, and by doing that, they erode the freedoms of individuals, and they start controlling the media. They start controlling, they overtax people, or they start controlling the governance model. They start changing things, and you end up getting to see forever presidents. I mean, I don't have to give some examples, but Russia, for example. You see these situations emerging. Whereas with a monarchy, it's quite clear. It's black and white between the rulers and the ruled. But you think, okay, that's unfair. People think, oh yeah, that's more like a dictatorship. Well, no, because in a dictatorship, there's no succession. There's no there's no continuity. Whereas with monarchy, yeah, there is a continuity. And as I said before, they're interested in making sure that they don't the father wants his family to be the father. I say the monarch. Wants his family to be there for millennia to come. So they extract as little as possible and leave as much as possible for their children, for the future. So if they overtax their citizens, they might not be in their position in a few years after, a few years time. So they leave enough for the generations to come. So going back to your question, where you see monarchies returning to Europe, maybe not in the short or medium term, definitely not, but maybe in the long term, you might see some smaller countries or in free cities start to emerge with a sort of monarchical plan, a little bit like Liechtenstein, where you're probably going to go and lead on to Liechtenstein.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Liechtenstein has a very good model, which was once an example that can be used for other places. That they function with it as a democracy, but with direct democracy and self-determination. Meaning that,
and I think that like the principality, or like the dukes or whatever they're called, like the royals, that they have this sort of veto, right? That they can draw upon, right?
So they have vetoes. They're more involved with it. They're like a semi-constitutional monarchy. I don't know the exact terminology of it, but they are more involved in the running of the country. But at the same time, their people are voted in to run other various offices in Liechtenstein. And please, viewers, correct me if I'm wrong. I should know this better than I do right now. But I know this for a fact, that citizens in the country can actually vote themselves out of Liechtenstein, out of the monarchy. But no one does, because everyone's happy the way it functions, because everyone knows how stable it is and how forward-looking they are. And you can just see it in the numbers, in their economic wealth indicators, that they have one of the highest GDPs per capita in the world. And people there are very well off. I was there 2 years ago, and I was impressed. Also, I like the fact that it's a very libertarian approach, because that's what a monarchy is, much more leaning towards libertarianism and with conservatism. But I was sitting in a restaurant there, smoking a cigarette, and I felt in Europe, which felt like Switzerland. As you know, Switzerland is quite pretty stable country as well. And I was actually quite impressed, because these people they do have a recognition of individual freedoms more so than other democracies around the world.
No, that's definitely true. No, it's a really interesting case being right next to Switzerland. Liechtenstein. I've been there many times as well. But I mean, yeah. So the similarities that you carved out
Oh,
was
so it was private property rights, strong private, and the other one is low time preference.
low time preference.
I didn't actually make a definite. I didn't make a distinction between the two, but yeah, low time preference is something that we learn about when we discover Bitcoin. For many people, it's something I didn't understand fully until I started reading up more about Bitcoin. I first discovered Bitcoin in 2017, but I didn't actually become, let's say, really into Bitcoin, a maximalist, so to speak, until like 2021, 2020, 2021, during the whole COVID hysteria. And I started studying more about it. And I realized that, yeah, it's great. And I started reading books like The Bitcoin Standard. And there's I think the whole section there about low time preference. And I saw the synergies between that and monarchy.
Yes, and it's also something that you start feeling once you're really into Bitcoin. It's you're feeling it like in your own life. Because like you're always asking the question. Then like we joke about it. Is it even worth it to get this sort of computer now because I could put it into Bitcoin? But it's exactly it. Like
The major decisions that your decision making decision making.
The behavior,
or whatever. Yeah, however you say it does change a lot when you discover Bitcoin. You become much more, I would say, not frugal. What's the word? But you become much more conscious about your decisions in the present and which have an impact in the future. And also, Bitcoin is, I see a lot of them are big family men as well. Which are family people, they have big families, and that is also an indicator of low time preference, and an indicator of very forward-looking people. They see the future, they have hope for the future, so they're comfortable having children, and this is for something that I find incredibly healthy, showing that we're on the right path.
Yes, that's exactly.
Because humanity continues through looking after our children, looking after the generations, and so it just makes sense.
Yes, yeah, it does make sense. Well, I mean, coming back to the nation state thing, and then maybe monarchies, principalities. I mean, I was always wondering, why haven't we seen more of these principalities like Liechtenstein announce that they're into Bitcoin? Maybe they are, we just don't know it. Maybe you have some insights there. But I mean, we have El Salvador, and El Salvador, like if you look at it, even though it's a democracy, I think you can also sort of say Bukele, he might be even seeing himself sort of as a benevolent monarch, in a democracy, obviously, because the way he behaves, the way he sort of when you listen to interviews that he's giving, yeah, he has exactly this sort of mindset that you were describing. The long-termism. He wants to do the country to do well, and he sees himself as this benevolent.
He's on his Twitter, I mean, it's X handle. He calls himself the philosopher king.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's what he is. And I get a lot of respect and kudos to him for what he's doing. But the only thing I would question is obviously the succession of his plans and how that's going to, I mean, he has an incredible, one of the highest approval ratings of a president in the whole of the world. So he's definitely doing a lot right. But then how does one continue that? And one hopes that the plans that he's making there do lay a strong foundation for his vision to continue. So I'm hopeful, but still cautious, because given that it's technically it's democracy, and democracy tends to flutter and move with the flow, with the flavor, with the ideological flavor of the age and stuff. So hopefully they're on the right path and people are being educated enough. And there's a lot of people that have uprooted their lives all around the world to move to El Salvador for that very reason, for their vision of the future. So I'm hopeful. And I remain positive. Going back to somewhere like Liechtenstein and why they haven't been looking towards Bitcoin, I would say that they have, but as I described before, monarchies actually have to take things very carefully. Given that we're in a world of 100 years of fiat currency, so it's roughly about 100 years of fiat currency, that this is very much ingrained in our society, in the way that we operate our business and everything, and Liechtenstein is a financial hub in Europe, in the world. Actually, they're one of the biggest one of the biggest contributors to GDP is financial services. So they're very much still very fiat oriented, even though they're somewhat more conservative and more libertarian than the average European. They're still very fiat orientated, and that's something that you just can't get rid of in overnight. But having said that, you do see some activities happening in Liechtenstein. I know some good Bitcoiners, that Liechtenstein Bitcoiners. One of them is actually one of my namesake, Filip, who's doing wonders and trying to orange pill the government there. Also, I hear plans that Liechtenstein is accepting Bitcoin for government payments. I mean, it's not ideal adoption, but it's definitely showing that they're paying attention to it. And given that their whole their dependency on financial services, and given what Bitcoin is, the future of finance as well, that they're starting to pay attention to that. So I expect more movements happening there. I suspect they'll be discussing right now after what happened in the States with the Trump executive decision that was just approved by the House, I believe, yesterday. Anyway, that's going to be approved, that of the Bitcoin strategic reserve. That's going to have a ripple effects across the world, and people are going to start paying attention to that. And maybe Bitcoiners are complaining that they're not seeing the ripples move fast enough.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is a question I wanted to ask you. Is this really going to have this ripple effect? Because I feel like it was announced through this executive order. I think for it to be really carrying weight, it sort of has to have the Congress also backing it. But isn't it maybe also that Europe is just laughing at this sort of, or this is yes, Trump is doing here?
Exactly what I was going to say. It's the association of Bitcoin with Trump now.
And also, it doesn't help that he's pushing like Trump coin and stuff on a Saturday night, on his.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all. You got to call him out on that. That's really, I mean, it's a bit disgusting. But I understand why he's doing that. They're making a quick buck, and this is the issues of democracies. Even though America doesn't really have a democracy, it's a fake democracy. But that's what you do. If you have a position of power and you have tools like that, you're gonna do these things to enrich yourself and your family members. And if it's legal, it's legal. People are gonna still do it. You're never gonna get rid of that until the system changes and you get rid of. Anyway, that's another subject. But going back to the association of Trump and Bitcoin is dangerous, because really Bitcoin doesn't care about politicians, and politicians should care about Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is, look, people around the world are still very much have a lot of Trump, there's a lot of Trump derangement syndrome out there. TDS is still very strong, and you see it with with a lot of the countries still that still have a strong hold of legacy media. And the legacy media are not going to speak favorably about Bitcoin because Trump is speaking favorably about Bitcoin. So that's obviously going to have an effect on adoption. But it's over time that's gonna peter out, because Trump is not going to be there forever, and Bitcoin is, though it's only a matter of time more people get educated about it. And you're starting to see now many examples right now around the world of MPs and people in positions where they've been voted in that are talking about Bitcoin. And it's quite encouraging. You had in Czech Republic, they've now just announced, and this is a European Union country, given that the European Union are very, very, very strongly against Bitcoin, and they were flirting with the idea of CBDCs for the end of this year, that they would be very anti-Bitcoin. But you have countries like Czech Republic, people in there who understand what it means, and now they've taken away capital gains tax on Bitcoin that's been held for more than 3 years, which is a fantastic move. And you'll get more activity like that, because people are starting to wake up to what Bitcoin means. And the big issue of the times is that individuals around the world are suffering from constant inflation, from the ills of the fiat structure of politics, of economics, of everything, and how that is just making us how a central bank just destroys all our this is polluting all and destroying and all our all aspects of life, from having families to going about to work to having to everything, to sports, to everything. It's having a detrimental effect on anything. So people are starting to wake up to that, and they're starting to understand that hard money is what's needed. That we need to go back to a hard money standard, and Bitcoin is that choice.
Yeah, I see. No, it's also interesting, because I think this is also why some people are now pushing for nation states to adopt Bitcoin. And I saw this interesting tweet by Saif Bedin, who just recently tweeted, what he thinks of nation state adoption, and he was like, yeah, the enemies capitulated too early, to Bitcoin, so to say, because this is this is also about the risks now. When I staying with the US for a minute, this is really, it's the biggest economy in the world. We now have this announcement, which sort of like, if you take it for face value, it's just bullish. It's really interesting that like the strategic reserve called out by the US government now. But the thing is, again, what are the risks? What sort of risks are you seeing also in terms of like, can governments sort of attack Bitcoin on the protocol level? And then the other risk is exactly what you described with the democracy, because what happens in a few years if Trump is not in office anymore, and like sort of a socialist.
I'm not the expert. I wish I could say I'm a Bitcoin expert. I'm still learning all the time, but I'm not.
Yeah, we all are.
I'm not concerned about an attack on the protocol. It's, if there was an attack on the protocol, if there was a movement to try and make a new coin out there, it would be, the majority of Bitcoiners or people around the world would be aware of this, and it just, a hard fork would just mean that coin, just like Bitcoin Cash, is just going to fail. So I think I'm not concerned about that. And I'm not even concerned about regulatory risk, because at the end of the day, they can't take your Bitcoin away from you. It's not fiat. It's not a CBDC. So yeah, you're going to have some issue. You're going to have some issues that countries that impose too strong of a risk. The only risk is just imposing strong risk that people will be like, oh, forget this. I'm actually going to keep my Bitcoin in secret, which I'm already doing, or I'm going to leave the country and I'm going to vote with my feet, and I'm going to set up my life in another Bitcoin friendly country like El Salvador. I say that, not many people are still in that mindset. The majority of population are still very much under the fiat spell, but you get more people waking up to the need of strong individual property rights. And that's something that we've been indoctrinated over the last 50 years, 60 years, or whatever. It's not 50 years since 53 years or something, 54 years since the gold standard, since the Nixon shock, that we've been led to believe that, we've been indoctrinated away from the idea that individual property rights are important, and that, the whole idea that socialism was the flavor of political ideology in recent years. I see it starting to disappear, but you get idiots out there talking about wealth distribution and stuff, and it's just going to have detrimental effects on the wealth of a country. If you start wanting to overtax your rich citizens, they're just going to end up leaving, and that's what they do, and then the rest of the country suffers. And I'm not saying this because I'm not saying this because I'm sucking up to the rich. No, it's just actual principle. First principle economics is that if you have wealth, you're going to go to where your wealth is best treated. So if you have wealth, you're going to leave the country if you're going to get taxed 50, 60, 70% of your wealth is being taken away from you. It's just simple science. And those people are needed to reinvest their money back into the economy. And yeah, fiat doesn't make that it makes the situation even worse through the Cantillon effect. So if you take away the government's ability to print money, then you're gonna have wealth you're gonna have wealth starting to be produced again, and individuals like you and me who are not super rich being able to accumulate. Well, I don't know how rich you are, but being able to accumulate and save in a currency in a property in a currency that's not arbitrarily being devalued by centralized force, and your spending power being eroded over time. So if you are able to save in a currency that is that's going to guarantee its value to go up, its spending power to go up over time, you'll feel more secure, and you will stay where you are, and you will reinvest in yourself, in your family, in your community. You will grow your family, and humanity and civilization just gets back to where it takes off again. And this is what we're doing. We're decivilizing right now with fiat. Fiat destabilizes the world, whereas hard money like Bitcoin will re-civilize the world.
Yeah, that's certainly something we hope to be seeing. But I mean, in terms of risks,
Back to risk.
is there sort of any risk at all that you're seeing with Bitcoin being adopted through nation state?
I just think it's a risk of media. One of the risks is what we talked about before, that Bitcoin's being associated with political movements like Trump. So populist movements like Trump. And you see why I say that is because a lot of the people who are very anti-Trump are your managerial class of people who in the West who hold high income jobs, who are the managers of the country, of the society. They're like 10% of the country, and they are more likely to follow the legacy media because they have bigger reputations. They have reputations to keep, so they're going to go with the flow, and the flow is telling them that that Trump bad, Bitcoin bad, and all the rest, all the debunked risks that are involved with Bitcoin. So they're holding back adoption, but at the same time, those who really need Bitcoin the most, your working class people, are waking up to Bitcoin. And they are more immune to societal indoctrinations by legacy media, and they're the ones who need it the most. So in a way, it's almost like a sweet irony that those who are like it, also countries around the world, same idea. Those who are feeling the worst effects of the fiat system and issues like the continuing effect are the ones who are going to wake up, who are ones who are going to need Bitcoin the most, are the ones who are going to understand Bitcoin the quickest. Those who have the worst inflation, those who are hard done by, people living in Nigeria and people living in Venezuela, in Lebanon, Gaza, all those countries around the world are having issues, political, economic, and all those issues. And people within even stable countries, the working class who need to take out a debt that with like 20, 25, 30% interest and stuff. These guys are the guys who can understand Bitcoin, and they are understanding Bitcoin. And these guys are gonna hopefully be better off in the future. They will be better in the future the more they adopt Bitcoin. And really, the strategic reserve of Bitcoin is the individual adopting Bitcoin and just holding on to it and understanding it.
Yes, yeah. That's also something that I think is actually true. Yeah, it's always better if the individuals are involved, and the individuals are the ones accumulating Bitcoin as much and as fast as possible. But then maybe in terms of nation state adoption, do you have any sort of other insights of what's going on? Maybe also these smaller countries, as you alluded to. El Salvador is one of these, but obviously there is Bukele, which is sort of specifically mindset that he has, but Suriname, or there's other countries I think who are looking at this. Right?
We're in
African countries.
Yeah, sure. We're in touch with a lot of people around the world working on different initiatives, and this is how we work with Jan3. Is that Jan3 is we are helping to trying to speed up hyper Bitcoinization, nation state adoption. And this is that we understand that Bitcoin is a bottom up strategy. This always is. It's a grassroots effort, but we also believe that there is some value in some top down strategies. And I try to make contacts with leaders around the world, with the title I have, but that doesn't really open that many doors. What really opens doors is individuals, Bitcoiners around the world, who have some connection to some MP, to some minister, or maybe even a president, and they start to work on that, and they reach out to us, and we maybe form like a Telegram group, and we can advise them, help them, and if it leads to a good meeting, then maybe we can help. We can help them meet the president. We can go fly out there. We would do some Zoom meetings or something. And we're just looking for any solution that will help that individual or that community or that country. As you know, Bitcoin adoption comes in many forms. There's adopting it as energy, as a form, as a way of accumulating wealth through mining energy, or there's adoption as a store of value, which we're seeing a lot now with Trump's plan in America, or we're seeing, or we can have an adoption as a money medium of exchange. And I think right now we're going to have a lot more. We're seeing a lot of mining adoption around the world, and this is happened before even Jan 3 was even formed. That a country like Bhutan was secretly mining Bitcoin for many years.
Yes.
And look how they are right now. They have a stack bigger than El Salvador, and they did this all through tapping into their excess hydroelectric potential, electricity. And it was very beautiful to see that a small country like Bhutan, and I have to point out that they're a monarchy. So
The kingdom, yeah.
it's a kingdom. So they're very forward thinking. They have they understand the value of Bitcoin, which is fantastic, and they're able to then use that Bitcoin to fund a lot of their projects and expand their infrastructure. This is something that we're seeing all around the world. You see countries like Oman in 2023 announced a $1 billion investment in Bitcoin mining. You see a lot of efforts happening in Middle East, and there's talk about it in Costa Rica. Obviously, there's El Salvador, and a nation-state adoption at the mining level is happening all the time, and it's the obvious thing to do. If you have excess energy, you can just mine Bitcoin, and with that money that you make mining Bitcoin, you can then use it to stack up, or to use it to fund more infrastructure projects, or any project in the country. Now we're going to see the onset of strategic reserve adoption, of store of value adoption, thanks to movements like what's happening in the States.
In the US, yeah. No, it's just going to be interesting. So you are of the belief that in sort of 3 to 4 or 5 years, if we were to get together again, I mean, a lot of more countries would have adopted Bitcoin, whether it be through mining, whether it be through strategic reserve announcements. That's really because you're seeing it happen in the background.
We're seeing, so we saw two major shifts that created more attention to Bitcoin and its credibility. Number one, I think this was even had the big more of a shift in terms of Bitcoin adoption, or people talking about it, and that was the ETF announcement in January last year. That seemed to push things further. Now with the Trump announcement, because we talked about that the ETF announcement was done by players like BlackRock, and they seem to have more credibility than it's obvious they have more credibility than Trump around the world. So that was a big wake up call for a lot of the world, that big companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and people like that are released a Bitcoin ETF. So that really made us. We received a lot more phone calls and attention, and people reaching out to us as post ETF announcement. Now Trump's thing is interesting because we're seeing more phone calls and stuff. But as we talked about before, it's the whole idea that Trump and Bitcoin being associated together is not the best. But I think that's going to have huge effects on Bitcoin adoption. Because once they start seeing America stack, you'll get a stacking war between, it's going to be game theory. You're going to have China stacking, Russia stacking, all these big players stacking after that. Once you see America's stack increase, because they haven't obviously increased it at this point, they're just holding onto seed coins. But once you see them stacking, then I think that's I won't say game over. That's game on.
Yes, yeah, for sure. No, that's going to be so interesting to see how this will evolve. But maybe one last question in terms of cultures, nation states, ethnicities. Do you think there's certain type of cultures or ethnicities that understand Bitcoin more easily because of their heritage, because of what they've gone through? Like obvious cases is people coming from a communist background, but just is there any thoughts on that as well?
It's a good question. Really, that depends on the individual, how open-minded they are, I would say. But yeah, so in Serbia, for example, in our region, we've gone through communism, and it's had a detrimental effect on our society over many years. So a lot of people here, they're already quite anti-establishment, anti-state, but they're also very pro-cash and very cash-oriented people. But you see a lot of people understanding the need for Bitcoin. At first, people here will look at Bitcoin and say it's too good to be true, and we'll look at it like some sort of CIA, Mossad, or MI6 project or something like that that's there to control them. But then once they understand that it's complete, it's freedom money, then they start waking up. They start paying attention to it. But I think no actual cultures have an advantage of others in terms of understanding Bitcoin. People would even argue that if Islam would see Bitcoin as their riba, their perfect money, which is according to Sharia law, that Bitcoin is that it's interest-free money. It's amazing. It's that you would thought that you would have a lot more countries a lot more Islamic countries adopting Bitcoin, but we haven't quite seen that yet. I guess it's also because they're quite conservative as well, and after 100 years of fiat currency, they're still getting their heads around it. I think maybe what you would see, where adoption happens the quickest is in smaller regions, smaller countries, smaller jurisdictions. So you'll get private or free cities, like just like what happened in El Salvador. Bitcoin Beach was a local project that grew to become a national project. So we're working now in Thailand on a community in Phuket that hopefully they're gonna use the government there they're looking into using it as like a sandbox of regulations to see how Bitcoin adoption can work there, and then hopefully then replicate that across the country. So you'll see smaller communities, smaller individual free cities. Your Singapores, your Liechtensteins, your San Marinos, your what other small cities out there? But you have all the Prosper in Honduras is another. Yeah, places like that will adopt Bitcoin quicker than other places, and smaller jurisdictions and monarchies that have quicker decision-making structures. I say quick. Yeah. Obviously, they don't want to rush too much, but they're able then to enact a Bitcoin law much quicker than a democracy. A democracy has to go through so many processes before hoops and whereas one of the advantages of a monarchy, which obviously they wouldn't want to rush the decision, but once they decide, it can happen. And I think you'll hopefully see this in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, in the monarchy Middle Eastern countries, and a lot of them are they are a blend of constitutional, semi-constitutional, semi-absolute, and absolute monarchies. So you'll see. I think you'll see a lot of movement in the Middle East there.
Yes, that's something we're already seeing, and it's probably going to accelerate only. Well, I mean, one thing I need to ask you, because you're a Serb, is really, when will Djokovic announce that he's sort of a Bitcoiner? Because he seems to be like a fitting character to own Bitcoin. I like him. I love him. Why hasn't he come around? And is anyone working on orange pilling him?
I would like to work on orange pilling, but he's a hard man to pin down. I mean, he's one of the biggest, one of the most famous people in the world, and not just for his tennis, as you said, not just for his tennis.
He's well received in Serbia, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course. He's like a god here.
Yeah, he is.
It's incredible how well received he is here, and all over the world, all over the world with freedom-loving people. Freedom. He's a freedom fighter. He understands what's happening in the world, and I think it'll be a matter of time before he announces that he's a Bitcoiner. I just hope that he's learning about it, and I will do everything I can to try and make him understand it, and that he doesn't go down the shitcoin route or something.
Yeah, no, it's always like, as you said, because he's so principled, and it's just sort of, maybe now he's too much into tennis, but maybe he's getting older as well, and at some point he will put his racket down, and he has more time on his hand, and then it would be interesting to sort of
he has wealth to protect as well, and there's nothing better than Bitcoin.
Yes, exactly. No, so let's hope this is one of the goals we have going forward to Orange Pill Djokovic. So yeah, thank you very much. I think that's pretty much it. Maybe just one last question that I ask to almost every guest on my show, like, is there any other high signal person that we should bring on the show that to talk about anything related to Bitcoin or just an interesting topic
Ooh,
at all?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of good Bitcoiners out there. I mean, you can try and have Samson on. I know he's very busy. He's booked up for the next couple of months, but maybe later on in the year or next year, you definitely have him on. Who else? Maybe one of the guys in our team. Maybe our marketing manager or our business director. One of these guys. Yeah, there's one business director, Michael Rosen, our marketing manager, Bevan Waite. There's some good. We've got some good guys working at Jan3. Jan3 it's an expanding team. We raised. We just finished our seed round recently, and we're expanding our operations. And Aqua Wallet is really taking off. So Aqua Wallet is a fantastic wallet that's we're aiming to be the new super app in the world. We're trying to make it so that the unbanked in the world could become banked through Bitcoin, and it's the one-stop shop, the go-to place, and you're able to do anything on your Aqua Wallet, from paying your bills to do some shoppings to saving to spending sats and everything, all in one easy accessible wallet that your grandmother can use.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the Bitcoin Super App, certainly something I have to check out. Well, yeah, Filip, thanks a lot for doing this. I think we're done for today, but have a great one, and hope to see you soon in the real world again.
Hey, thank you, Pascal. It's great conversing with you. Sorry.
Thank you.